The four of us are here to prevent the apocalypse. Your family has been chosen to make a horrible decision. If you fail to choose, the world will end.
Before we go ahead and get into Class on a Glass Cast for your ass with a little bit of sass, I'm going to review M. Night Shyamalan's latest movie, Knock at the Cabin. And for those that don't know, this is an adaptation, and, M. Night Shyamalan's no stranger to adaptations. His previous film, Old, was an adaptation of a graphic novel named Sandcastle. He's adapted other things before, been inspired by things, Jeff. But this is indeed based on the 2018 novel The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul G. Tremblay. And it follows a family of three, nuclear family, who are vacationing at a remote cabin, but they're suddenly held hostage by four crazy strangers, a seemingly crazy chat, led by a man named Leonard, who demands that they sacrifice one of their own in order to avert the apocalypse. Pretty interesting premise, I have to say, Chad. It's like, oh, that sounds fun. That sounds like it's going to be filled with tension and hard choices and changing dynamics and relationships. Before I kind of go into my overall opinions on the movie itself, I did want to, talk about M. Night Shyamalan as a filmmaker and his filmography. I've been doing reviews for a number of his films this week. And thankfully, I reviewed, some of his best movies, in my opinion. The movies that I really, truly enjoy, I think are fantastic. The Sixth Sense, I think that was one of the best movies of the 90s, one of the best horror fantasy films ever made. It ended that decade strong, Chad. Great performances across the board. I mean, it's iconic, when you got little Haley Joel Osment saying, "I see dead people." When you just hear that line, you instantly think of The Sixth Sense. It stands out. It's within the pop culture zeitgeist. And then you had a movie like Unbreakable, which was ahead of its time. It was a deconstructive superhero story in a time when studios and directors and writers, filmmakers, they were trying to come up with the formula for a lot of superhero films, just really work on that subgenre. And eventually we got to that, with films like Iron Man and The Dark Knight, which I feel like are very much, those films started the modern superhero film, that standard, if you will. But Unbreakable, that was the one that I feel like was underrated. People, I think, maybe misunderstood it and wasn't maybe marketed right. But I think in time, people have come to recognize that, yes, as a great film, great genre movie, and one of the best superhero films of all time. And great performances, very well written, and very well directed. Some iconic moments in that movie. And great twists, both in The Sixth Sense and in Unbreakable. And I know Shyamalan, he directed two other movies, I think, before Sixth Sense. I've never seen them. I've heard they're not all that great. I only know that, of Sixth Sense onwards, right? I feel like most people do. But then after Unbreakable, I do feel like there was a change. Shyamalan, he was being promoted as like the next Spielberg. People were all excited about the big twist in his movies. That was kind of the thing that defined everything for a while. And he did movies like, Signs and The Village. And, I think those movies are okay. They're fine. I've only seen them maybe once, maybe clips online, maybe occasionally on TV, catching certain moments and scenes. Not that they don't have, great things about them, good things about them. They do. But overall, I don't know. They just feel lesser compared to, something like The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable. It's just like, it's not very memorable, for me. And then I feel like after those, then we really started to get into the films that have really defined M. Night for a long time, for a decade plus. Lady in the Water, Happening, The Last Airbender, After Earth, just movies where he seemed to forget how to direct and write for people, which is very weird for me. I feel like his ego overwhelmed him and his sensibilities of a filmmaker, and he seemed to focus on the worst aspects of his filmmaking abilities, chat, and especially when it came to writing dialogue and just directing people. That was the thing that I think that has most frustrated me. And after certainly after the failures of The Last Airbender and After Earth, he kind of reinvented himself as a way. He's like, all right, I'm going to step away from more big budget movies and go back to more intimate films. It's something like The Visit, which I think probably The Visit, honestly, might be his third best movie. And then, he started doing things like Split, which was a surprise sequel to Unbreakable. And, then we got Glass, which I think is terrible personally, but that's just me. I know some people that do like it. Pretty disappointing end for the Unbreakable film series. And then, you get things like Old, which I did not particularly like it all that much. I think, again, it had many of the issues that often plague Shyamalan's more recent films. But, I know a lot of people that did enjoy the film. I wasn't one of them. And that brings us to, Knock at the Cabin. And I have to admit, I know several people who are really looking forward to this movie. But for myself, nowadays I kind of go in with either no expectations or pretty much zero expectations to M. Night Shyamalan. I don't feel like he's been able to reach, the heights of his career, which was in the late 90s and very early 2000s. So, that's kind of a good way to go into, instead of like, hey, being all hyped up and be like, hey, this is the next big film in his filmography. You just kind of going in like, I don't know what I'm going to get. I think that's probably the best way, the healthiest way to approach just a film in general. But listen, that brings us here, chat. With M. Night's latest film, all I'll say is I think this is definitely better than a number of his films in the last several years. Certainly better than something like Old or Glass, maybe even Split. It's probably his best since The Visit, I would say. Does it reach the same heights as The Sixth Sense or Unbreakable? Absolutely not. But it does have a lot going for it in terms of its premise, its technical aspects, and a number of its performances. Later career Shyamalan, like I said, has definitely focused on telling more intimate stories, and that desire, I think, serves the movie pretty well. We follow this small nuclear family where we have these two dads played by Jonathan Groff, who I love. Jonathan Groff, I think he's a really underrated actor. He's probably best known for playing King George III in Hamilton, the original stage musical. That was him. I thought he was fantastic. And I'm not familiar with this other guy, Ben Aldridge, who also plays his husband in the movie. But their vacation with their adopted daughter, Wen, who's played by this newcomer. I think this is her first film, Kristen Cui. And I think Gruff and Aldridge do a good job, in the movie as these, very caring and passionate parents. That comes across very earnestly. I was like, yeah, it feels very wholesome. I like their dynamic a lot. And I have to admit, Cui, she really holds her own with them and the other actors in the film. Shyamalan, I think, when you think of like, oh yeah, of course Shyamalan knows how to direct kids, and you think of Haley Joel Osment and his performance in The Sixth Sense is fantastic, and obviously, with the kid in Unbreakable, but you look at something like The Last Airbender, it's like oof, or After Earth, oof, pretty bad, But then you look at other things like The Visit, but then you go back with like Old, and I didn't feel like the kids were very well directed in that one. He's very hit and miss of kids. I think he's given us one of the most iconic child performances of all time with Haley Joel Osment, right? And then he's given us some of the worst of things like, The Last Airbender. It's weird. It's crazy. But this one, thankfully, this one falls into the, Haley Joel Osment category where I think she's very good, and she's not, I'm not saying that it's iconic like Haley Joel Osment's performance, not at all. It's just that you have a lot of big personalities in this movie. You have a lot of people fucking screaming at each other. And she fits naturally in with the story and those actors. She holds her own, and she doesn't feel like weird or anything, like out of place, like some of the child actors have in past Shyamalan films. Now, listen, the obvious standout in this cast, like I know everyone's saying this, but the obvious standout is Dave Bautista. He's the primary source of exposition in the movie and conflict in the film, and he does a great job of unnerving you. He has this kind of like unstable awkwardness about him that makes him feel very unpredictable. And his interactions with many other characters range from either, charming to outright just being really creepy. He's like this big old nerd, this big buff, just unstable nerd. And I really like that. The other thing though, outside of the couple and the kid and Bautista, you do have other characters in the movie. The other three people who are being led by Dave Bautista to attack this cabin and to hold this family hostage and to force them to, one of them to kill the other. They kind of all feel like afterthoughts to me. It just, they stand there and they cry and they occasionally look crazy and they hold these really gnarly looking weapons. I mean, I can't even describe some of these, like a hammer on a hook. And I was like, that looks weird. You got like this fucking giant pitchfork thing, but it's like, it has this huge handle. And it's like, that's kind of creepy, but I don't know. The other three, I don't even want to say what they are. The other three home invaders, they were fine. There's nothing about them that's outstanding. Probably the most recognizable of them is Rupert Grint, and I like Rupert Grint. I think he's a very good actor. I'm seeing him pop up in a lot more things nowadays. A lot of television shows. He was most recently, at least what I most recently saw him in, was the Cabinet of Curiosities. He was in one of the episodes for that. Rupert Grint has this fucking ridiculous accent. He's like really, really, he really likes this like New England accent. And I've been hearing him doing it in a lot of things, and I'm just like, I don't know if that's great. It just kind of sounds goofy to me. But hey, it's cool to see him. It's cool to see him. But I don't feel like there was enough material written for them, because all of the best crazy, right? All the most unsettling moments and scenes for these four are all kind of given to Bautista, and he does well with that for the most part, right? I mean, at this point, like, everyone is just like, oh yeah, I'm surprised. I'm not surprised anymore that Dave Bautista is giving a good, or in this case, a great performance in a movie. All right, he is an accomplished actor. He's been killing it for nearly a decade now, Chad, and I'm excited to see him in more things. I like that he's picking different projects. He's not just, he's not like The Rock, who's just like, I'm just coasting by on being The Rock. It's like, this is like, no, I'm a fucking actor. I'm playing different people and characters. Like, most recently, he was in Glass Onion, where I wasn't as fond of that movie as other people were, but he was like one of the highlights to me, right? He is so distinctly different in that movie than he is here. And I really like that. He's showcasing his breadth of talent, and you see that on display. And he's doing a very good job. And in terms of the technical aspects, I think the film has some great camera work. It feels very tight, which in turn makes it feel claustrophobic and increases the tension. And being at a cabin, alone in the woods, it's a very familiar setting. We've seen it across all sorts of movies and genres and everything, mediums. But it's used effectively here. It's a great location to do something like this, and it suits M. Night's sensibilities now, where he wants to tell more intimate stories. Right now. Here's the thing. The film does suffer from consistent, chronic problems that have continued to plague M. Night's films post-Unbreakable. Pretty much every character, even the ones that I like I just said, talking about, Gruff and Aldridge and Cooey and Bautista, those are the ones I really liked in the main, those four. They all have moments where they're just forced to deliver this stilted, awkward dialogue, which makes them feel like lifeless automatons. It's very apparent in the film's first act, and it's just like these matter-of-fact statements that don't need to be stated out loud. It just comes off so weird, and it's off-putting, and most of the time when it happens, it's just unintentionally funny. People are just snickering. When I went to go see it at the theater today. And I just don't get it. Why because he didn't used to do that. Listen, I don't know how it was in his original first two movies. I don't know. But in recently rewatching The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable, that's not really there. At all. And then suddenly, I don't know what happened. Signs on, I started seeing that more and more and more and more. And now it's just it's a defining thing in all of his films. It's like if you blindfolded me and you just told me if you just blindfolded me and it's like, hey, this is a new movie that's coming out. Listen to these characters, the way they're speaking to each other. I'm pretty sure I'd be able to identify it was an M. Night Shyamalan movie because of the ways in which the characters are talking to each other. It's just, there's, so, for example, there's a moment in the film where you realize, these four home invaders, they're talking about, hey, listen, you got to do this or the apocalypse will happen, right? Okay? And you realize, like, oh, shit. It's like, oh, this is interesting. It's like the apocalypse. There's 4 of them. It makes you think of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. It's like, oh. But subtlety is not M. Night Shyamalan's forte. At least it certainly isn't now. Back in the day, sure, maybe. With The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable. Now he's like, no, because the audience might not know, and so he like literally has the characters say like, hey, we're like the 4 horsemen of apocalypse. Like, you didn't need to fucking say that, and it happens throughout the entire movie. It's like, stop it. It's annoying, and it takes away because for the most part, it's like, there's a lot of good stuff here, but man, every time it comes up, it feels, it undercuts tension. It undercuts the conversations, the really intimate, tension-filled conversations that these characters have, and it's just annoying. It's just really, really annoying, and it undercuts the performances, especially Bautista. He's not immune to that. It's not any of the actor's fault. It's the direction and the writing. And I know Shyamalan, like, I don't believe he wrote this alone. No, he has 2 other people on here. He has 2 other people who wrote the screenplay, but I don't think it's those people's fault. I think it's him that keeps doing that, and he's got to stop. I would love to. I mean, I don't know if anyone's talked to him about that. Like, why do you insist on your characters sounding this way? It's like it's this exposition dump. It's this word vomit of, here, this is my name, this is what defines me, and look at this obvious thing that we're all seeing. It's like, you don't need to do it, okay? Stop it. It's very annoying. But outside that, it is better than something like Old. I think it is better than something like which has that throughout the entire movie. All the dialogue is like that, and it's like, it's grating for me personally, and in Glass and things. But overall, I do think this was a better film than he has made in the last several years. Another thing too, I kept thinking about The Happening while watching this. Not because it's as bad as that film. I'm not saying that. No, this is better than The Happening. Thank God. The thing is though, it kind of made me realize, like, oh, this is almost like a remake of The Happening. It's borrowing a lot from that movie, and I don't want to say too much because I guess it's spoilers, but especially in regard to the subject matter and things happening outside the cabin. But I feel like it's using those themes and ideas in a better way, and it's not as ridiculous or comical. Now, listen, you still got some goofy fucking lines that don't make any sense, you don't need to say, but it just felt like a more intimate, structured version of Happening. It's almost like, all right, it's like they had the screenplay of The Happening. It's like, we need to change a lot of this. Let's keep it pretty much at one location, not as many characters, no Mark Wahlberg, good choice, and get Dave Bautista in there. All right, here you go. It kind of felt like a remake of that movie, which he has said, they're like, oh, I wanted to make a B sci-fi horror environmental film, and I'm like, I don't think that's true. I don't think the whole, like, I'm gonna make a B movie. I'm like, no, I don't think so. Because you treat that shit so seriously. But I think overall people are going to like this. They're going to dig this movie a lot, especially when it comes to the tension. I think that's weaved throughout. It's 90-minute runtime, 90-plus minute. I think it's like an hour 40. Again, he's being economical with that running time. He doesn't keep you there too long. He's not indulgent. Not overindulgent like a lot of filmmakers would be, doing a 2.5, nearly 3-hour fucking movie when there's no point to do so. It's like he gets you in and out, which is nice. And Bautista's performance, I think, is going to entertain a lot of people. He is the standout of the cast. But the other three, Gruff and Aldridge and Cooey, I think they're good too. Again, I don't want to. There's no really twist here, so don't go in expecting like, there's going to be a big fucking twist. It's like, you learn pretty early on, like, okay, this is what's actually happening. It's like, okay, and that's fine. That might make it feel like, okay, whatever. Well, then it came to the third act. It's like, well, it's pretty much what we all thought was going to happen, and then it happens. And so that might, I don't know, annoy people or maybe even bore people to a degree. But overall, I think it's better than a lot of his stuff in the last couple of years. It's his best movie since The Visit. Like, at this point, if I were to rank any of his movies, obviously, Shyamalan, Sixth Sense, and Unbreakable. That's number one, number two, very high, and then distant, very distant, third. I can go The Visit, and then probably right behind The Visit is probably this Knock at the Cabin chat for me. But that's just my opinions on Knock at the Cabin. I'm curious to hear what other people's thoughts are on this movie. Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Did you have the same issues that I had? Did you like Dave Bautista's performance? What do you think of the other supporting characters? What do you think of the other three horsemen, as they so obviously state in the film? Let me know. One thing too. I don't know why this movie's rated R. That's the other thing. Like, this is his second R-rated movie, I guess, behind The Happening, which, again, The Happening is, like, so fucking goofy. I can't believe that's a rated R movie. It's like, really? That's a rated R? Okay. But that's, it's kind of funny. It's like, both of those are rated R, and they're very similar to each other in terms of their subject matter. But I don't think it's need to be rated R. I mean, there's violence, and there's a lot of tension, and, it's like, oh, shit, and potential violence, like, towards a child, but I don't know. I didn't feel like it needed to be rated R. I think it's a hard PG-13. I mean, there's more violent shit on TV nowadays, so anyway. But, let me know what you guys thought of the movie.